There we go. So that's up and running now. So we've got that. So without further ado, I am going to share my screen. So I'm hosting Andy's slides. And we will pass you over to Andy to continue the evening.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that introduction. As we know, my name's Andy Twort, and I'm the chairman of the Island Flyers, the model flying club up on the Isle of Lewis. You've probably already worked out that I'm not a native of the deepest part of Scotland, so I come from Brighton. So a little bit about me before we start about the islands. So I first noticed aeroplanes when I was 8 years old. I was living just outside Brighton, and a family picnic going up to the top of Trudy Hill. And on the way there, we saw hang gliders. This is back in the 70s at Mill Hill, just north of Shoreham. So the family picnic ended up at Mill Hill. I was absolutely fascinated by these guys jumping off the hill. But even more fascinating were these light aircrafts going into Shoreham Airport. I can't remember what they were, but the aeroplanes that were buzzing in and out of there in the 1970s. And I was absolutely fascinated. Anyway, so next time I had the opportunity to spend some holiday money or some birthday money in the toy shop, instead of buying a gun or a model gun or a ball or something, I noticed keelcraft kits. So I started building keelcraft kits. The first one was not very successful, and I took it to the local wreck, and it didn't really fly. And some old bloke wandered over and he said to me, if you made the fuselage so it didn't look like a banana, and if you made the wing so it was kind of straight, it would fly a lot better, or it would fly. Anyway, I listened to him, and the next one was better. Anyway, I built lots of these keelcraft kits, rubber band models, free flight gliders, whatever. And eventually I discovered a thing called a quick start Spitfire diesel engine, which I bought. I saved up for a long time to get this thing, and that got me into control line, which I was never very good at, but this was noisy and it was great and really enjoyed it. Anyway, models took a little bit of a backseat for a while. By the time I was 15, I discovered the gliding club, and that was it. I was always at the gliding club, went solo when I was 16. And I spent a lot of time in the workshop with the old boys, learning how to fabricate aeroplanes, repair them, whatever, gliders, the tug plane, whatever. And that was really great days. So did a little bit of work at Shoreham, and I went solo in power flying out of Shoreham. We bought an Ollie 2, started flying cross country, spent a lot of time still at the gliding club. Of course, the gliding clubs, they're not active all the time. If there's no instructor on site, you can't fly. So we started getting back into model flying again. I had a little 2-channel radio, which someone sold me secondhand, and someone also sold me an OS40, which was great. But a 2-channel radio meant that you start the engine, you put a bit of locking wire on it, flat out, and off it goes. And after 7 minutes, make sure you're as high as possible, because you're going to be, every landing's a dead stick. But that was really exciting. Anyway, I wandered off to university and did a degree in aeronautical engineering. Stuck in the middle of a big city, Manchester. So I spent a lot of time building models, and when anyone with a car could get me out of the city, we'd go and fly them, which was always great fun. Anyway, eventually I got a PFA inspector's ticket, a BJ inspector's ticket, and I spent most of my working life working on wood fabric aeroplanes. From time to time, I'd get a model, repair it, fix it, fly it, enjoy it, but in a very informal way. Until about 5 or 6 years ago on Facebook, I saw that Stuart Sutherland was setting up the Island Flyers, model flying club up on the island. And this was a really great opportunity for me to get back into model flying again. So I was down south, I wandered into a model shop down in Worthing, and I discovered that you could buy a model that was all covered, and you just sort of pushed a few bits together, and it was ready to go, which was amazing. Anyway, I bought a cheap radio and joined the club. We started flying here, but I discovered that modeling had changed since I was young. So now we had things like model memory. I thought it was fascinating. My cheap little radio, you could move switches and just reverse the direction. But now you could control the throw. You could control so many things on the models. Anyway, so playing with the model club, let's have another slide. There's if one comes up, that's me. So yeah, this is the Barber's Flyer. Now, I built and designed lots of, or created them really on the bench, various models. This one's called the Barber's Flyer. Let's have another slide. And the next one, there's a couple of models. The one nearest us, the big white one, that was also called the Barber's Flyer. It's a glidery shaped thing with a tail dragging undercarriage. It's quite fun. But all my models, I just call them the Barber's Flyer. After a while, I bought a new radio that had model memory, which is really bad if all your models are called the Barber's Flyer and you've got model memory. So that's the red Barber's Flyer, and that's the big white Barber's Flyer. And so I just started enjoying, rather than flying models that someone else had designed or built, I just really enjoyed creating my own things, just, you know, on a whim, really, creating models. Anyway, so I was going to say that I've had a PPL for the last 40 years, and my power flying was in the Oster. Actually, I owned an Oster for a while. I had a Falk for a while, done a lot of flying in the Cub and the Beagle Pup. And let's have another slide. And the current mount for me is this, the Sky Arrow, which is a fantastic aeroplane, I think. It's got glider type visibility, short field capability. It's got a really good payload. And that is a Sunrise out of Stornoway. That was I've actually landed before that photo was taken, took off 30 minutes before sunrise. Really enjoyed watching the sunrise come up, and I've just landed there. So that's all I want to say about me. So we'll move on to another slide. Now you know who I am. So I live in the Outer Hebrides. When you tell people you live in the Outer Hebrides, you get one of three replies. The best reply is, wow, that's great. The next reply is, no, seriously, where do you live? And you say, no, seriously, I live in the Outer Hebrides. And the third possible reply is, where is that? So for those of you who are in the where is that category, it's top left. So that chain of islands that are fascinatingly mainly red paint. Oh, look at that. There's a little arrow on the thing. Brilliant.
Well, that do.
That's brilliant. Well done. So that's the Outer Hebrides. So everyone knows where I am. Now, I use this map, or it's probably technically a chart, because this is the average winter temperature. Buckminster and the Outer Hebrides are about the same colour. So whereas the main bulk of Scotland, as you can see there, is cold, the Outer Hebrides in the winter is not that cold, which is really good. So from a model flying point of view, you can use batteries and use them right through the winter, keep them in your pocket, and it's not too bad from a temperature point of view. If you look at the top bit of that island, of that chain of islands again, you'll see the outside edge is generally red and the middle is white and blue. Now, we all live around the edge. So let's have another slide. There's a couple of slides here taken out of the Sky Arrow. And we'll see why we live. Oh, that's good. We live around the edge because that's the middle. That is the middle of the Isle of Lewis. It is one massive great peat bog. I mean, if you wanted to get to the middle of that picture, good luck. I mean, it's just seriously wet. And there's, in that picture, there's kind of nowhere-ish in the bit that you can make out. There's nowhere you want to fly a model. It's flat-ish, well, slightly wobbly. It's very wet. Yeah, you're just not going to fly models there. Now, the model flying site we actually use is just on the coast. Oh, look at that. There's another picture. Don't worry, that's cool. Anyway, so it's just on the coast of that previous picture. This is the same sort of place looking south. There again, you'd kind of think there's nowhere much you could fly a model there. On the left-hand side in the hills, you can see is roughly where I live. But that's looking south towards the hills of Harris. The Isle of Lewis, the Isle of Harris, it's the same landmass. In the main bulk of that picture, there's nowhere you want to fly. Let's have another slide. This takes us back right down into the hills of Harris. So that's a totally different landscape, only a few miles further south. Now here, if you're into flying gliders off ridges, there are opportunities. What I would say though is there's no footpaths, and it's a hell of a slog to get up to the top of some of these hills. But if you've got the tenacity to climb to the tops of some of these, there are some landable, nice ridges to fly gliders. We don't do much of it up here, not in these sorts of areas, but if you're fit and keen, it's kind of quite doable. So, well, clearly, you know, flying normal sort of Barvus flyer type models, nothing I've shown you so far is doable for us to fly. If we look at the next slide, look at that. There is a gorgeous model flying site. So right on the coast, on the west coast, there's an area called the Maca. Apparently it's rich from lime-rich shells washed up thousands of years ago, eroded by powerful winds. So we have this tiny little bit of land on the west coast. It's in the west coast of other islands, and also an island as well. They have this sort of area. So we have this fairly good, big, flat area that we can fly from. Let's just run through a couple more slides there. Another one of the same. I mean, you can just see that we've got plenty of space runway wise, and another shot now, same area. Okay, what you can see here is that we've got totally flat approaches, nothing in the way, no hedges, no fences, and the houses you can see at the top of the screen, they're pretty much our closest neighbour. So in terms of making noise, it's not a problem. Now I would say,
are you allowed to fly from that big puddle there?
Absolutely, yeah. Oh yeah, great question. Mention it at this point in Scottish land rights and whatever, you've got this right to roam. You can walk kind of wherever you want. If you can get to a piece of water and you want to put a model in it or a kayak in it or whatever, just go and do it. It is absolutely not an issue. It really isn't. So yeah, that's absolutely free for us to fly floats off. Well, absolutely, no problems at all. And of course, it's not a puddle; it's a loch. Now the land here is owned by a community trust. So the land is owned by the people. Most community trusts I've come across, most communities I've come across in the Outer Hebrides, the people there like to have facilities. So the people around this area, they're happy because they've got a model flying club. They come along and they talk to us occasionally, and they stop when they're walking their dogs and they watch us flying the models. But there's no opposition to us flying there. So, you know, we're flying, it doesn't cost us anything to have this site. It's not perfect in as much as it's used for grazing. So a good model site has a big roller and no cattle. We have big cattle and no roller. So it can be a bit undulating at times. So there's another couple of pictures we'll just run through quickly. In terms of communities, this is the beach at Solace. It's the next island south. We organise a fly-in every year for full-size aeroplanes there, and the great thing there is the community that operate that have this beach and that live around here. They're delighted that we go there. We keep the beach as an airfield. It's on the charts as an airfield. They like us being there. They like to see us there. And when people come in and they say to me, okay, is there any quiet routes out you want us to take? I say, no, go noisily past the village and wave at people because they want to see you. That's a totally different thing from what I've experienced in other parts of the UK. Let's just have another quick picture just to get through this little bit. And there's another picture of the flying a sort of slightly wetter year. And there's some noisy aeroplanes there. Everyone's happy for us to be there, which is really good. But let's just get rid of the slides for a minute. I mean, you can look at me or, oh no, that's a bad slide, but that's all right.
There we go.
That's good. Anyway, so it all sounds perfect, doesn't it? We've got areas we can fly from. We've got peace and quiet. We've got people that love us and want us to do things. So, of course, it's not a marvelous utopia. It has some problems. So at the moment, I'm sitting at 58 degrees north of the equator. If you're down at the Lizard, southernmost point of the UK, you're sitting at 49.9, we'll call it 50. If you're up in the Arctic Circle, it's 66. So at the moment, I'm sitting halfway between the south of England and the Arctic Circle. So in the summer, we have lots of daylight. I mean, lots of daylight. You can sit outside midsummer's day at 11 o'clock at night and read a book without turning a torch on. Midwinter, of course, it's a very different story. We have lots of dark. So sunrise after 9 in the morning, sunset 3:30 in the afternoon. So in the middle of the winter, there are perhaps 5 hours available per day you could fly models. We're 50 miles out into the Atlantic, and with that far north, so we get storms. I mean, we really get storms, and we can get windy weather that just goes on day after day after day after day after day. So like a lot of clubs, our members cannot fly midweek for 6 or 7 months of the year if they're working, quite simply because they drive to work in the dark, they drive home from the dark. That just leaves weekends. That's not unusual for a lot of clubs around the place in the winter. However, this is a deeply religious island, and Sunday means everything is closed. Recently, or in the last few years, the ferry comes in and a couple of commercial flights come in. There is one petrol station that's open. Apart from that, everything is closed, and everybody respects that. So our model flying site, whilst they're delighted for us to be there 6 days a week, day 7 is an absolute no-no. And that's not just a case of, other people are telling us that we can't fly on Sundays. My members say to me, no, the record attempt this year is on a Sunday, not getting involved, which is cool. It's absolutely fine. But it does mean that our members have got a very small chance to keep current through the winter. And like a lot of skills, particularly if you haven't got a great deal of experience, if you can keep current, it becomes easier. If you do it regularly, you get the hang of it, you get better during the summer, you keep your skill level during the winter, get better the next summer, and so on. Anyway, so as I said earlier, it's windy. It's the third windiest place in the UK. So we'll go back to that slide that we just saw of a really sad looking model aeroplane, if we can. It's going to come up on the screen. Yeah, there it is. So I don't normally advertise my mistakes, but I don't mind. There it is. There's the Barbers Flyer with a broken aileron. And it occurred to me that the biggest problem for us keeping current was it's windy. So in what wind conditions can I fly a model? Where are my limits? So it's easy to say, well, let's keep it below 10 miles an hour or whatever. That's fine. But then could you fly it in 15 and so on? Anyway, so I was increasing my risk by going slightly windier, getting out to the model flying club and to the field and flying it. And on this particular day, it was blowing 20 knots, 22 knots, that sort of region. And I thought, yeah, okay, well, I've flown it in 18, let's give it a go. Put the model on the ground. At some point, you've got to point it into wind, put it on the ground. At some point, you've got to let go and pick up your transmitter. So I let go of it. And by the time I picked up my transmitter, it was gone. So this thing kind of picked itself up, cartwheeled up the runway. Amazingly, it broke the prop, even though the prop was actually stationary. I hadn't actually put any power on or anything. Obviously, the aileron's hanging off. No big deal. Bit of super glue, it's all fixed. And thankfully, nothing else broke, which was quite surprising. Anyway, I put this up on Facebook, and the guys in the group said various things. Some of which were too rude to publish. But one of the guys said, oh yeah, well, it's really windy. I got a glider out of my car once a while ago, and as I got the wing out, it snapped in half. It was really windy. So I thought, oh, that's not good. And someone else talked about a quadcopter that just took off and flew straight back into a wall, and various other things. And I thought, well, okay, what do we need to get a model that can fly in strong weather, in strong wind. There was a few comments that people suggested this is a good model for windy days or whatever. And I thought about it, and we'll put another slide up on the screen. And I came out with, you all see the picture from the adverts, the Breezy Flyer. So it's a weird looking thing. So why do I think this is good in windy weather? So the starting point is that sitting on the ground, the wing is sitting at about, well, I'm assuming it's flat ground, it's sitting at about -7 degrees, nose down. So the angle of attack sitting on the ground is nose down. Now, if you look at the curve for any sort of typical wing, it reaches zero lift at, I don't know, -5 or something like that. So I've put the wing while it's on the ground, so it's pointing down. So the stronger the wind, the more the lift force is negative and pushing it into the ground. Now, for what it's worth, if you put this thing, hold the elevator somewhere near the middle, trim it forward or something, and you open it flat out and blast it down the runway, it will not fly. It will just suck itself or push itself more closer to the ground. Not that it can get much closer to the ground. So that was the starting point, was a model that the stronger the wind, the more it's been blown down, not up. So you can't really see from that photo exactly how that angle of attack looks, but kind of trust me, that's where it's sitting. I then had to put some wheels somewhere. Now, traditional undercarriage, put the wheels closer together in the middle. As I said earlier, we have cows and no roller. So if you take the sort of undercarriage width, standard sort of width, and you put one wheel 2 inches lower than the other wheel, the opposite wing is probably 10 inches up into the air. Inches, yeah, inches, that'll do. So if the model was a bit skewed to the wind blowing sideways across the wing, it turns it into a flat plate and picks it up. And it'll just flip over. Just no aerofoils, it's just a flat plate and off it goes. So I thought, well, how do I keep the wing on near the ground? So put a wheel at each wingtip. So if the wheel's at the wingtips, it will be near the ground. The great thing about the model, the wing being really near the ground, is that it's really breezy up there. At head height, it might be blowing 20 miles an hour or whatever. Down near your ankles, it's blowing at 15. But right in the grass, and I mean right in the grass, the wind speed on a breezy day isn't particularly high. So I wanted the wing kept very close to the ground. So that's where I put those wheels. Obviously, with the nose pointing down, we've got to rotate, so it has to be a nose wheel aeroplane. You can see vaguely in that picture there is a nose wheel. It doesn't steer, it just sits there. So on the ground there really is no steering to speak of. There's a fairly powerful rudder, but the idea is it's a breezy day, it's going to be airborne in a half a pace or a couple of paces, so directional control on the ground's not really an issue. So that's where we put the wings, or the wheels rather. So the fuselage is simple. It's a piece of gaboon plate. It's an offcut from a Jodel repair I did years back. It's just a straightforward, get a piece of wood, cut it out on the bandsaw ×2, glue a few bits of balsa wood between them, and you've got a fuselage. There's only really 2 distinct gluing operations to put that together. So if you snapped it in half and wanted to build another fuselage, 2 evenings and you've got it. So I wanted something really simple. You can see that it's got very big control surfaces. When it's been thrown about all over the place and you really want it to go somewhere, powerful controls are good. I discovered, I mentioned earlier about exponential controls. It's a new thing on me, but with really high exponential controls, you don't get too much pilot-induced oscillation at low speed or at low movement. But when you really want some input, you've got it. There again, it doesn't show brilliantly from these pictures, but the controls are a little bit cut back from the size of the elevator, from the size of the tailplane, from the size of the wing. So if it does end up rolling around upside down, whatever, hopefully you won't damage the ailerons. Rubber bands, rather than bolt it together, rubber bands give a lot of flexibility in the event it hits the ground in a unhappy attitude. So the rubber bands are there just so that when it goes wrong, because it's going to go wrong if you're operating in horrible conditions, when it goes wrong, you've got a lot of flexibility through the middle of the thing, through the two heaviest components. Obviously, you can see the ailerons are connected on the top surface. That's just to keep them out of the grass. Obviously, we all like to put them underneath so that the model looks cleaner, but they're on top for that. The prop's in a really strange place. It's right at the front. It's really high, but it does give a reasonable amount of prop wash over the tail group because that's obviously quite high as well. So that's the design features that you've got in front of you in that picture. Let's have another picture. And the next picture, same, just another angle of the same thing. The battery fits from above. I know that's kind of standard, but a model I really enjoy flying is the Riot. I really enjoy that, brilliant thing, but you have to turn it upside down to put the battery in. And on a breezy day, on a really windy day, you don't want to be mucking about like that. So the battery goes in from above.
It's a pain, even on a calm day, putting the battery in a Riot, isn't it?
It can be, yes, yes. So that's why it definitely goes in from above. That's one of those things. Okay, so it's not very streamlined, and quite clearly, it's a pretty draggy box I'm throwing around the place. And I make no, I don't pretend anything other. Form, interference, whatever, profile, it's draggy, but it has a fairly powerful motor at the front. Now, a powerful motor, if you're going to be using it, drag it, pull it through the sky, your flights are going to be short, but it's cold, it's windy, you don't want long flights. So fly it for 6 minutes, pop another battery and fly it for 6 minutes, put it back in the car, go home. That's the logic with it. Now, the other thing that's really kind of different, if you have an aerobatic aeroplane, you try and put all the mass in the middle to get as low a moment of inertia as you can. And I thought, well, why don't we put everything right at the edges? So we've got wheels at the wingtips, we've got a motor at the front, we've got servos at the back. So we've actually, there's nothing in the middle of this model, just empty space. So we've got a really high moment of inertia. The logic is that the higher the moment of inertia, the less it's going to be thrown around. In reality, you don't notice the difference. But that's the logic in having all the bits around the edges rather than in the middle. So let's have another picture, because one of the comments that came back was that one of the guys in the club got his glider out of the car and the wing snapped in half. I mean, that's just a flat plate against the wind, I'm guessing, and hold it in the middle and the two ends just snap in half. So we decided that we're going for a spruce spar booms and plywood webs. So that's just a picture of a scarf joint in a piece of 6mm or whatever spruce. So we've now got some sort of moving on quickly through some slides. So another slide. There's a wing, a typical standard wing construction. Nothing to say about it other than in that respect, it's totally normal. Some ribs cut out using actually you can see next to the can of Coke, there's a template of the bit of plywood, the shape of the ribs, cut round with a scalpel. There's some, look, as I've put, I can see a pin through the tip rib, so looks like I've used light ply for that. And yeah, there's nothing to say apart from that's I think a fairly typical wing construction. Let's have another slide. And on the next slide, another one the same. It just shows you where the wheel is really, or how the wheel attaches. Let's move on again. So that's weird, a weird photo here. These are two arrows. I'm a fairly serious competitive archer, and if an arrow if you can perceive any bend with a dial gauge, an arrow is not straight enough to compete with. So you do end up with a lot of these things spare, like, you know, lying around the place. So I decided that as I had these, they were a good thing to use for stiffening the tail group. These are ACC's aluminium carbon composite arrows. So 6061 T whatever tube up the middle wrapped in carbon. They're perhaps a little brittle, but they're phenomenally strong before they snap. So let's have another picture. So here's fin and tail plane, I suppose. So we've glued carbon spars into bits of balsa wood. There's another story here. It's a bit about the Western Isles, really. West Systems epoxy, I like it. And anyone that's got a workshop has got lots of things lying around, some thinners and some acetone and some wood glue and all sorts of things. And generally speaking, a pot of resin's a handy thing to have. These sorts of resins are great because you've got lots of different additives you can use to do all sorts of jobs in the workshop, gluing wood, whatever, and all sorts of materials. So I'd run out, I didn't have any. And I was putting this model together and I thought, oh, I'll pop into the boat chandlers and pick up some epoxy. So there's a big boat chandlers on the island. I wandered in and they had massive, great vats of polyester, various additives, hardeners, mixing pots, whatever. And I said to the guys, any epoxy? And they said, nah, don't keep it anymore because it has a shelf life. And, you know, we've got fishermen that use polyester by the bucket load, but, you know, this is, you know, classic boats and stuff, so not enough demand, we don't stock it. So okay, fair enough. So I got in touch with someone on the mainland who supply this stuff all around the UK, and they took my money and then they got in touch and said, sorry, we can't send it, dangerous goods, dangerous materials, we can't send it to you, you're offshore. And I tried various other companies and no, it's offshore, can't send it. So something as simple as this, I couldn't get sent to me. So someone was on the mainland, I asked them to pick me up a pack and they brought it to me, that was fine in their car. So we have, as well as the weather and things, in terms of doing things up here, getting materials can be a problem. And I knew I was obviously talking to you guys tonight. So I had a quick look on, I won't name them, but a very well-known balsa supplier in the UK. And I just put a fake order of 6 sheets of plywood, of balsa wood together. Mainland delivery, £12. Delivery to us, £30. It might not sound a lot more, but if you're putting a model together and you're having 3 deliveries from 3 different places, you can be up to £100 worth of delivery fees on a model that didn't cost much more than that to build. So getting stuff up here is difficult. Recently, I was after some plastic covering. A big supplier or big advert in RCM&E, I spoke to them and they wouldn't send it. Why? Well, we can't send it because it costs too much. So something as simple as a roll of plastic covering, can't get it. In the end, I did persuade them to use the Royal Mail, which is the same price for any UK postcode. And it turned up, which was really sweet. But initially, they weren't going to send it. Obviously, batteries, forget, can't send them, full stop. Anything that's going to come by air. Fuel for glow engines, ditto, quite difficult to get it up here. So we do have some problems in getting in materials delivered up to here for models and model flying. Anyway, so going back to that picture, that's how I made the tailplane and the fin as strong as I could get it. So when it ends up upside down, hopefully it's strong enough. So let's run through a few more pictures fairly quickly here. So yeah, that's another picture of the fin. Let's move on. There's it's on its side. There's a picture of the fin and the tailplane. It's clad in plain balsa, so it's phenomenally strong when it ends up upside down. Notice when, and that's a nice picture. So the method of holding the tail group together, those 2 king posts, spars, whatever you want to call them, hanging out the bottom of the fin, go through the 2 holes in the tailplane. They go down through the plywood, the fuselage, which is plywood skinned at that point, top and bottom. And there's a couple of bolts at the bottom holding the whole group together. Kind of fairly simple. So we'll move on to, there's just a few slides. Oh, okay, that's on its side, but that's a picture of the wing on the kitchen table, pretty much ready to cover. Let's just run through some more slides next. Okay, Breezy Flyer, there it is, covered, kind of ready to go. So at this point, the model's ready to fly. And let's have another slide. Okay. The eagle-eyed amongst you will notice this is a different fuselage. This was a fuselage Mark 1. I have no problems with the concept of trying things, don't like them, do it again, move on. So this fuselage, it flew all right, but it's a little bit too short at the front. CFG was, it was troublesome getting the CFG where I wanted it. So I'd made some guesstimates that weren't perfect. I will admit having put a little bit of lead in the front to make it reasonable. It looks really pretty. It flew fine, but I hate the idea of having to carry ballast around. Hence the reason for creating a different fuselage, which is only a couple of inches longer at the front. So that's it in its natural environment. That's the model flying. Now, at this point, I would say that's it. I'm going to stop and we're going to leave that image up there. But of course, when I've covered that wing, as you saw, it was on the kitchen table. When I put the graphics on, it was on the kitchen table. And when I put the rubber bands on, I realized that the word Breezy really could have been left a bit further. So I can't leave this as the final picture. So we'll go on to the next slide. That's better. So we're going to finish there. And that is the Breezy flyer in its natural environment. So that's all I want to say. Thanks for this. That's good. Actually, there's something else I want to say. A couple of things I want to say. So the first thing I want to say, thank you to Stuart Sutherland. Stuart, who set up the Island Flyers. He was there, tenacious to the end, trying to get the thing going. And without him, I wouldn't be here now doing this. So first of all, thank you to Stuart. Great what you set up. And I know that I speak on behalf of all the members of Island Flyers to say thank you for getting us off the ground and getting us going. And while I'm on Hornet Model Flying Club down on the Isle of Wight, I noticed you're online somewhere earlier. I was down there a few weeks ago, did some flying with them. They got me through my A certificate, which was wonderful. So I want to thank Neil, John and Paul for organising my time down there and hosting me wonderfully. So thank you. Right, question.
I would suggest to everybody when you're next on Facebook, look up Island Flyers because it's. I keep following them because we get very interesting things like obviously the pictures appears for the Breezy flyer, but their activity up there I think it's fantastic. So yeah, do follow them. So yes, we have some questions coming through.
Excellent.
Right, going back to one of the slides, Peter Becker over in Seattle there, or near Seattle, was asking what the antenna was on top of the hill.
Oh, I'm a licensed radio amateur, 2 Mike Sierra Oscar Sierra Kilo. So that was a HF. I was doing a SOTA summits on the air activation on top of some mountain somewhere.
Yeah. Okay. And Peter also asked, have you got any school gymnasiums you can do indoor flying in on the island?
We're working on it, but no, not at the moment.
At the moment. All right. A few on the actual aircraft then. Brian Cullen's asking, would you see any advantage to the same basic wing configuration, but a pusher mounted on a pylon like a Bixler or Easy Star type of setup?
I can't see any particular advantage. That's not to say there isn't one. I can't see one. The only disadvantage that I had was, I mean, if you did that, you kind of need to bring the servos at the back end further forward. Because as you saw from the picture of the green and white fuselage, I had problems in getting the CFG far enough forward, even with the engine slapped beyond the front of the front wheel. So I think you could do that. You'd need to get some weight, somehow get some weight further forward. So I think you'd probably need a much longer fuselage and a battery right at the front end just to get the CFG somewhere reasonable. So yeah, so that's my best answer, but I don't know. Yeah, that's my best attempt at answering that.
Right. Richard Smith's asking span and weight, please.
Don't know. I mean, it's about 1 point. I don't know. How tall am I?
That big.
It's about 1.3 meters and it weighs about, I don't know, 1.5 kilograms, or it's in that sort of region. So let's go for, my best guess is going to be about 1.3 meters and about 1.5 kilograms.
Smashing. I think it's good not knowing. Yeah. Oh, there's another one there. Same question. So that's been done. Peter Becker looks like he's a licensed radio amateur as well. In fact, KI78EZ, I think he's put. If you fancy contacting him on the radio.
Right.
Graham Kennedy has got to zoom off, literally, to another Zoom.
Thank you, Graham.
Probably a scale one, knowing Graham. He says it's fantastic to see his homeland showcased so well by you.
That's nice, thank you.
Yeah. And Malcolm Hayes is saying if you can get a ferry, you can come to Dornoch on the 14th.
Brilliant, we might do that. Thank you, Malcolm.
It's a good flying site up there. I've been to Dornoch as well.
Brilliant flying site.
Yeah.
They looked after me when I visited them a while ago, and they were very accommodating, and had a good time with the guys there at Dornoch.
Yeah, no, I went up a few years ago, an issue with a neighbour, which was all nicely sorted, all amicably, which was good. Right, Stephen Heathcote, what is the typical wind speed where you fly, and how much stick time would you say you do get up there?
Oh, gosh, brilliant question, I suppose. Typical wind speed, I tend to keep my flying down to 15 miles an hour, or maybe 15 knots. Above that, I'm experimenting rather than enjoying my flying. How much stick time? I mean, personally, I can get out quite a lot. So I probably get flying, I don't know, probably on average once a week, I suppose. And depending on the weather, depending on the time of year, it could be anything between 1 10-minute whiz or a couple of hours of flying various models. But I suppose I personally enjoy it when it's 15 knots or less. After that, it's kind of hard work.
Yeah, it's not so much fun, is it, when you're having to battle everything all the way through? So,
but it's fascinating.
Yeah. Another question just come in from Paul. Does it take off easily from the ground? The terrain looked quite snaggy. Actually, I think it's a technical term. Snaggy for the wingtips. Do you sometimes hand launch?
Brilliant, absolutely superb question. Does it take off easily from the ground? Yes, by nature of having far too much power. I mean, once it's in the air, if you point it literally straight up, it will climb vertically, because it's just a stupid amount of power in the thing. In terms of snaggy for the wingtips, yes, it's phenomenally snaggy for the wingtips. Having wheels right out there, as soon as one wheel gets a bit of more drag than the other one, the thing is trying to rotate sideways. So yeah, I mean, it is in that respect, that's a bad thing. However, the logic is that it's going to be airborne within a few paces. So if it gets airborne at 45 degrees direction from the runway, it's not a problem because it's up and it's going up into the sky. And yeah, I mean, massively snaggy for the wingtips. But that's one of those compromises, and to my mind, get something that will just get in the air as quick as possible. Also, it's worth noting that if it's blowing at 20 miles an hour, 25 miles an hour, you can afford to approach at 25 miles an hour or more. So you're not operating at 1.3 VS, you're operating at 5 VS or 3 VS or something. The same thing, getting airborne, you know, it's as soon as it's rotated, it will fly. So as soon as you've got the ability to get the tail down, this thing will climb massively. Yeah, it will.
Yeah, I do like the idea of an aircraft that sort of drives itself into the ground while taxiing along. Yeah. It's sort of counterintuitive, but it's sort of developed for what you need, isn't it? Which is excellent.
I mean, the idea is to be going forwards when you arrive at the ground, and certainly not going backwards when you arrive at the ground. So so your landing speed can be phenomenally high in terms of an airspeed in those sorts of conditions. There was another part to that question. I forgot what it was.
Well, Let me have a look. I'll go find it because I've moved it off. It says, do you sometimes
hand launch? Right, hand launching with a model like this, I have done, but I would recommend very, very strongly that you don't. The reason for that is the motor is phenomenally high, and it's going to pitch itself nose down. I speak from experience. It will pitch itself nose down as soon as you put some power on, massively. So I have hand launched it. I've got away with it, but don't advance the throttle too rapidly. Not because for no other reason than it's going to go junk. It's the forces of that are massive. Make sure it's well trimmed back before you throw it in the sky. So yeah, sorry, I missed the second part of that answer, but yeah.
Sounds like a candidate for an inverted hand launcher.
Go for it. You demonstrate. I'll have the video going.
I think looking at this, we're going to have to set up a section in the Air Tonight forum for amateur radio call signs. Peter Becker's asking for yours.
All right. Excellent.
And Peter Agger is in the chat for Dunfermline. So it sounds like we've got a.
Oh yeah,
Right. Okay. A couple more questions have just appeared. It looks like everybody's a radio amateur apart from me and Barry. Rob Harris, is turbulence more of an issue at high wind speed, or is it ability to penetrate the wind? Have you ever had a model take off backwards when it leaves the ground handling zone? PS like Barry's cat.
Okay.
Beauty.
Is turbulence more of an issue at high speed, or is it ability to penetrate the wind? I don't know the answer. I'm not even going to try and can pretend that I know the answer. I'll make a guess though. We're very lucky in that we have a very smooth area all around our flying site. So we don't get anything like the turbulence that you get if you're anywhere near buildings, hills, whatever. It's very, very smooth, the land around us. So turbulence for us isn't really an issue at our site. Obviously, ability to penetrate the wind, as long as you can go 5 miles an hour faster than the wind, that isn't an issue, because it will come back to you at 5 miles an hour ground speed, which is fine. And to be honest, I don't know what that thing goes flat out, but it goes like a rocket. So the ability to penetrate the wind with that model in the sorts of speeds I've flown it is absolutely not a problem whatsoever. And in terms of a model taking off, leaving the ground backwards, I personally haven't. And obviously this thing, it just leaves the ground forward, it accelerates. It's got to accelerate a little bit and have some prop wash over the tail group for the thing to rotate. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, a few more questions have appeared. With another call sign there from Simon Hawkes, GM6 VME from Perth. He says he's on the island frequently. What evenings do you meet? Did I spot you flying last Wednesday or Thursday PM? I recognise the aircraft. You were out of SYY, whatever that's.
Gone away. Yeah, I was probably flying Wednesday or Thursday last week. Last week was great weather. So I was doing a lot of model flying, a lot of power flying last week. So yes, you probably spotted me. Hello. And in terms of evenings do we meet? We don't. We get together whenever the weather says we can get together. When you're next here, come and say hello. Come and join in. It'd be great to see you. Thank you.
Stephen Heathcote, do you get any torque roll on takeoff after leaving the ground with such high winds and powerful motor?
No, I haven't. I've not experienced that whatsoever. No.
Have you ever flown or considered flying EDF jets with strengthened flying surfaces?
No, that's going to be well above my pay grade, I'm afraid. So no, but go for it.
Yeah. And one on the wind there. Does the wind speed vary in speed and direction, or are they pretty constant?
They're pretty constant up here, to be honest. Yeah, because we're right on the coast. I mean, literally 100 yards from the sea. So we've just got very clean Atlantic air hitting us. The strong winds are always from the west, or generally from the west. So yeah, we've just got very clean air that hits us.
Smashing. Well, that's all the questions there answered. Thank you. Well, there's some lovely feedback in the chat there.
Good, thank you.
I did drop the Island Flyers Facebook group link into the chat. So if anybody wants to check them out on there, I think they do post some very interesting things. It's definitely a little bit different to flying on the mainland, that is for certain.
Andy,
Yes.
Could you tell us about the radio amateurs? I mean, I knew about that, sort of 40 years ago, 50 years ago. It was a good way to communicate across continents. You would have thought that would have gone out with the sort of modern communications. What's the attraction and driver on that? We've got about, I'd say probably at least 5% of the people tuned in tonight were radio amateurs.
Okay, well, it's one of those kind of, if you ask 1,000 amateurs, you'll get 2,000 different answers.
Right.
So personally, from my thing is designing and operating. So I'll design radios, transmitters, receivers, whatever, and I'll operate them. And so to start with, an idea of creating a transmitter, to go from that to eventually you manage with 5 or 6 watts of power to talk to in the middle of Africa or something, to me that's an amazing challenge. To some people it's a case of a bit like stamp collecting, and I hope that doesn't sound insulting, of let's get using commercial equipment, let's get a signal into every country or into every part of every country or whatever. So, and in that respect, it can be a bit like the achievement scheme, that you're trying to tick the boxes, fill the boxes. So for some people, it's about experimenting with aerials, using commercial equipment. It's very rarely about talking. You might use voice as a method of communicating, but it's very rarely about actually finding out anything about that person that you're communicating with. But I say, for me, it's about designing equipment and making it work.
Okay, that's a good answer. I got to say, I really like the utilitarian approach to your model design. There's been a lot of comments in the comment section about that. I have to say, when I first looked at it, I thought it kind of reminds me of an Antonov AN2, which I've always thought is a very utilitarian aircraft. And with also, like you, a lot of power in an AN2. I think about 1,000 horsepower.
Massive.
Yeah. So that was a really interesting presentation, and it shows the kind of lengths you've got to go to keep model flying going up there. Not only the design requirements, but also the hurdles that you have to cross with getting your materials and equipment. Yes. Yeah. Good talk. Thank you very much.
That's a pleasure. I mean, the utilitarian aspect of it is another word is ugly, but it's an absolute. I mean, the concept that you could build a fuselage in 2 evenings, because if you're operating outside your ability, you will break it. I mean, there's something nice being built. I'm building in the workshop at the moment, and I spent hundreds and hundreds of hours on it. It will only come out when it's really calm, because I don't want to bend it. So if you have something that this is. I mean, what does that fuselage take to build? Let's say you cut it out on a bandsaw, you glue a few bits together, you drill a couple of holes. It's probably a total of 4 or 5 hours workshop time, if that. So you actually, it doesn't really matter, and very little money. So you're not that worried if you get it wrong. But if you then start making it really pretty and streamlining stuff, it then you don't want to risk it. And simple things like the fin goes through some holes, you put a couple of pins in the bottom, and the whole tail group is fixed together. I like that sort of simple bits of design. Makes it a lot easier, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's a candidate there for Breezy Flyer pylon racing.
Breezy Flyer pylon racing, yeah.
New class.
I'll have to go up there and we'll have a race.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Everyone is very welcome to come and join us. Definitely.
Okay.
I think we may have to take you up on that. I think we'll just stop the